We're starting a new series called Alpha. And Alpha was started out of the Holy Trinity Church in London, and they started it for their own church to bring people into a deeper relationship with God, whether you're a non-Christian or a brand new Christian or you've been a Christian your whole life. And it just looks at the core basic elements of faith. It looks at who is God. It looks at who or what is the Holy Spirit. It looks at who's Jesus and what does that have to do with me. It looks at what is the Bible about? What is prayer about? So it's these core foundational pillars to our faith. And so we're going to be going for the next 6 weeks through this series. This morning we're talking about, is there more to life than this? And as you look at that question and as you look at those basic core elements of faith, I would hope two things. First of all, if you are a brand new Christian or you're new to church, I hope that each week you come and you grow and you go deeper in these foundational principles to Christianity. And if you are like me and you are raised in the church, I hope that each week you can leave with something that allows you to go throughout your week and sharing the truth of Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit. I know for me growing up I knew a lot about the Bible as a third-generation pastor and a missionary kid. I could quote you a whole bunch of stuff. But when it came to sharing my faith with others, that scared the living daylights out of me. And so I hope that as we go through this, you are able to walk away with some of those truths and teachings. If you look at the very first thing that Jesus said to his disciples, as he stopped and he looked at them and he simply just said, "Follow me." And then if you fast forward to the very end of his life, in the last 48 hours, he's sitting in the upper room, he's with his disciples, he's having this moment with them. And he says to them this simple thing. He just simply says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." And if you look at Christianity and you look at what it means to follow Jesus, there's so much knowledge in those two areas, those two conversations. Follow me and understand that I am the way, the truth, and the life. You know, we go through life asking this question, there's got to be more than just this. There's got to be more than just what I'm doing with my life. And Jesus says, follow me. Like, just literally start following me. And as you're following me, understand that I am the way. I am the truth. I am the life. If you're an overachiever, hopefully you've already filled out your handout here. It says, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. You fill it out, put it down, and we can focus on everything else here. So if you look at this key idea that we're going to be circling around this morning, it's just simply this statement. It's time to move from a faith that is moderately important to a life radically transformed by Jesus, a life full of meaning and purpose. Well, a statement like that you have to back away from, and the question that you ask is how? Like, how do I get to that level where I really feel like I'm finding my purpose and my value and why I'm here and what I'm supposed to be doing and how I'm supposed to be living? But how do you get there? You know, in today's day and age, we live in a world where if you have any question about anything, you pull out your phone, you hold it about right here, and you Google it. And you get your answers instantly. If you're in a fight, it generally ends with, oh yeah, Google it. And you stop, and it's like the old version of fisticuffs, but you're really just holding out your phones, and you're both trying to Google it first. And whoever is the wrong Googler is always... But if you also really want to know who somebody is, you look at their Google search history. So what I'd like to do is pull out your phone, hand it to the person on the left, and say, go ahead, look at my Google search history. How do you like me now? Last night, a guy got up and just bolted. He's like, I'll deal with some things at church, but I'm not dealing with my Google search history. So I was thinking about this, and I was like, well, what is my Google search history? And so I pulled out my phone earlier this week, and if you know me, you know how much of a train wreck this is about to be. The first thing that I'd Googled was, how many miles away is the moon? Not sure why I wanted to know that, but I did. Next one was, how many miles is Jerusalem from Phoenix? Just in case you can take a road trip. The one right before that, Run DMC's Walk This Way. Because sometimes when you're writing a sermon, you just get stuck. You just need something to lift you up and move you to that next point and free your mind. And I could sing it for you, but the one before that, this is going to disturb some of you. How to properly kill a chicken. It's really in there. like about 45 times. See, my family and I are living on property now, and we're trying to grow and raise everything that we eat. And so we want chickens to eat, and so I bought meat chickens. I didn't know there was a difference between egg chickens and meat chickens. Just so you know, meat chickens look like aliens, and they're scary to look at. Hen chickens, egg-laying chickens, they're fine. You can play with them. But the meat chickens, and they only live about 52 days, and then they need to permanently go to sleep. But somebody has to permanently put them to sleep. And so as that day was getting closer, I've never killed a chicken. And so I'm Googling and watching all these things on how to do it. And the day came. And, well, they're sleeping comfortably in my freezer. So, and if you have a problem with that, I don't care. I know where my food comes from. You don't. The next thing. I mean, I should care, but I don't. How to deliver Nigerian dwarf goats. Sometimes you buy a goat and it's pregnant and babies come before you're ready, and so you're frantically screaming, Google it, and the babies are coming and you're watching, and so I let my wife take over on that one. I'm out. 1976 Airstream restoration. I bought an Airstream last week and it had been sitting behind somebody's house for 16 years. It didn't have tires. The place, I mean, it's as train wreck a possible situation that you can get into. And I bought it in Tucson, so I had to figure out how to get it up. It's fine. It's in my side yard if you want to restore it, because I don't have any idea what I'm doing. How many weeks old am I? No idea why I wanted to know this, but I did. I'm 2,482 weeks old. So take that home and live comfortably with that knowledge. But you know, you look at somebody's history, you look at what they Google, you look at where they go for answers, and we live in this world when we have any question about anything, we reach out our phone and you just begin to Google. You look at life's purpose. Is there more to life than this? I mean, you can Google that. You can even Google Christianity. If you Google Christianity, you're going to begin to get things like it started 2,000 years ago by this guy named Jesus. It was in Jerusalem, which is 7,400 miles away. And it'll give you opinion after opinion and after fact after fact after fact, but it's not going to take you to a deeper place of knowledge. It's not going to take you, as much as you Google this, it's not going to take you to a place where you fully begin to understand what it really means to follow Jesus and to how to have your life just radically transformed by him. You see, what happens when you begin to understand who Jesus is and how he ties into your life is your life begins to really transition and change and move, and you find purpose. Bernard Levin is this columnist. He's from England. He wrote in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. He was a world-renowned columnist, and he wrote often about why we are here on earth. And he said this, he said, have I time to discover why I was born before I die? I have not managed to answer the question yet. Why do I have to know why I was born? Because, of course, I am unable to believe that it was an accident. And if it wasn't one, life must have meaning. Life must have meaning. It can't be that we're just here. We're just existing. We're just moving from point A to point B, and then life, before you know it, is over. If you turn to scriptures, or you turn to Jesus, if you're going to look at the core values of Christianity, you go to what Jesus said and how he lived. In those last 48 hours, as he's sitting there with the disciples, last week Brad Lomanek talked about how he sat with the disciples and he began to wash their feet. And he told them to go out into the world and, in a sense, be hope dealers. Go and bring hope to everyone that you meet and everyone that you talk to, and talk about the great joy and peace and purpose that you find in the way of pursuing Jesus. He then talks to his disciples as they're all sitting there. I picture them in this room and they're just quietly listening. They know Jesus, something's about to happen. They don't fully understand yet, but something is moving. And so he turns to them and he says, one of you is going to betray me. And he looks at Judas, and there's this moment where Judas just gets up and runs out of the room. And imagine if you're sitting there with the closest friends and the closest followers, and you're watching that unfold, and then he turns to Peter. He says, Peter, even you, my rock, like my closest friend, you will deny me. Peter's like, that's never going to happen. Like, what are you talking about? So there's this feeling of what's going on. Like, why is Jesus leading us down this path? In John chapter 14, verse 1, it says, Jesus comforts his disciples. So obviously they're dealing with some issues of something's going on here. Like he's doing something, he's moving someplace, something's happening. And so he speaks to just his closest followers and he says, do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God? Believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I am going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and take you to be with me. And you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I am going. So now we have the benefit of looking back and reading in scriptures. Imagine what it must have been like as they sat there and listened to him say that right there. I don't know about you, but I would have been, what in the wide world of sports is he talking about? Like, what is going on? See, people give Thomas this bad reputation for being doubting Thomas. Thomas is just the guy in the room that says what everyone else is thinking. In verse 5, Thomas said to him, Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way? You see what Thomas is saying? He's asking a bigger question. He says, you're talking about this home. Can you get us there? Can we be there with you? Will we find peace and rest? Can you take us to this place that you're calling home? Jesus answered in verse 6, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. That first phrase there when he says, I am the way. Other interpretations say, I am the road, or I am the path, or I am the road that leads you home. So if you just take that right there and look at this key idea of moving from a faith that is moderately important to a life radically transformed. First of all, when he says, I am the way, picture everything is moving in the same direction. And Jesus says, this is the path that I am walking on. This is the road that leads you home. This is the understanding that life isn't about here, but there's this bigger picture. You're searching for purpose. Well, you're searching for purpose here on earth. And as you are traveling on this road, on the way, there's these constant side roads that you stop and you look and you think, maybe that will bring me more pleasure. Maybe that will fill the void that is within me. Maybe this path will finally allow me to have peace with who I am. And Jesus says, I am the way. I am the way home. On a bigger idea for us as we go down that, this understanding, you cannot find your way home with a better career, with a better job, with a better relationship, with more success, with whatever this is that we're constantly pursuing. You see, we live for things that are here. Our desires are based on things that are all around us. But when you go back to the question, is there more to life than this? You have to really look at what is this? When Jesus says, I am the way. I was reading this last week, and there's a paragraph that I read, and it says this. It said, each day, it seems thousands of Americans are going about their daily rounds, dropping off the kids at school, driving to the office, flying to business meetings, shopping at the mall, trying to stay on their diets, and coming to the realization that something is missing. They are deciding that their work, their possessions, their diversions, their sheer busyness are not enough. They want a sense of purpose, a narrative arc to their lives. Something that will relieve a chronic loneliness or lift them above the exhausting, relentless toll of daily life. They need an assurance that somebody out there cares about them, is listening to them, that they are not just destined to travel down a long highway toward nothingness. Is there more to life than this? Is there more to life than just what we're daily going through? And how do you get to that place where you know that you know that you know that this way is for me, is for you, is for all of us? Leo Tolstoy was a writer, a Russian writer in the 1800s, and he wrote on a regular basis with this question of, why do I live? He was born into money, and so he said he dove deep into what that money could do with him. And he said there was this void that he always felt he was trying to fill. And he said, regardless of how much money I had or spent, it still felt as if there was a void here. So he said he dove deep into pleasure. He dove deep into science. He dove deep into philosophy. And thing after thing after thing, he kept filling into his path, into his heart, into this void. And he says every single time he'd come out feeling exactly the same, as if there's got to be more. He said, I even dove deep into family. He said he had like 16 kids. He said, I got to the point where I had so many kids it distracted me from everything. And so he said, finally, he said he was serving with the Russian peasants, with the poor. And he wrote after his conversion that he was led inescapably by experience to the conviction that only faith gives life meaning. In Romans 10:9, it says, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. You see, Jesus says, I am the way. I am the way. It's not exclusive. It's not for a limited group of people. It's not for people that are good. It's not for people that are holy. I am the way for everyone. You want to find why you are here on earth, understand that I am the way, and begin to follow me. And if you don't know how to follow him, then follow somebody who is following him. And begin to do whatever it takes to walk in that current, in that path. He then goes on to say, I am the truth. I have to be honest with you, it's somewhat easy to follow the way, to walk in the path. It's more difficult to grasp that truth where he says, I am the truth. Because that's more than just head knowledge. That's making it real. When he says, I am the truth, he says this. C.S. Lewis is writing, and I read this statement years ago. It says, Christianity is a statement which, if false, is of no importance, and if true, of infinite importance. The one thing it cannot be is moderately important. I've thought about that statement for years, and I realized that my life, my faith, Jesus was moderately important. If you look at the Christian faith in the Western world, I feel like Jesus has become moderately important. And I know that's a hard, heavy statement, but when it says, I am the truth, when he says that, it's this understanding, the Jewish people had an understanding that you could know everything there is to know, but until it migrated down to your heart, it's not going to change who you are. It's not going to make a difference in how you live. You see, it's not about the evidence of Jesus. It's about the relationship that you have with him. And when he says, I am the truth, he's saying, look, you can have all the head knowledge you want. You can do all the research you want to. But instead, until that moves into your heart and it changes how you're living and the paths that you're going down, you're never going to get it. Romans 10:10 says, for it is with your heart that you believe and are justified. It is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. I knew who Jesus was for 30 years of my life. I moderately lived it out. I was really good at reading my Bible and raising my hand and praying and going to church when I felt like it. And he was moderately a part of my life. And I would say throughout that process, were you a Christian? Absolutely. But I just moderately followed. And I began to really pray about, God, what is my purpose? I wrestled through that question. And this statement, I am the way, I am the truth. I am the truth. If he's the truth, then that has to migrate from my mind down into my heart. You see, Jesus cannot be moderately important to you. Jesus has to radically alter who you are. There's this idea of traveling overseas, and I tell people when I bring them, Google it. Like, Google, you want to go to Malawi? Google it. Study it as much as you can. Look at the people, understand where it is, look at the culture, look at all those things. Learn as much as you can. But you're never fully going to understand what the people of Malawi are like until you go with me and you sit with them and you're in a hut with them and you're eating a meal with them and you're going with them throughout walks and you're just with them for a couple weeks. Once you've actually experienced it, then you begin to see how that shifts who you are. I grew up in Thailand. I've always known about women trafficking, and I've always understood there was prostitutes everywhere. I got it. I understood it. I knew what it was. But it wasn't until several years ago where I was brought into the brothels, deep into the brothels, and I was watching men and women buy and sell. And then I really got it. It went from head knowledge to my heart, and it wrecked me. You want to understand something? You want to understand a culture? You have to go there. If you want to know what it means when he says, I am the truth, then you've got to let that migrate from your mind down to your heart. I am the way, I am the truth. And then he says, I am the life. Like, I am the life. Just stop and think about that statement. Stop and think about this idea of life. This last week, we lost Judy Volz. She sits up at that table. She passed away this past week. Her daughter was in the front row in the last service. And every week, we deal with loss. We deal with people passing. And it's hard. It never gets easy. And you think about life and how quickly it moves. This last week, we were talking about high school for whatever reason, and I stopped and I did the math, and I'm like, wait a minute. I've been out of high school for 29 years. Like, how'd that happen? Some of you are like, that's nothing. Others are, you're like, oh, my Lanta, you're so old. Both of you be quiet and let me just live my life. But I was sitting there, I'm like, 29 years? Like, I feel like I've been out maybe 6 or 7 years. Maturity level, maybe 3 or 4. I'm like, how did that happen? Like, 29 years. It just goes. Life just happens. It's just a mist. And what I've realized is when he says, I am the life, I think what I did most of my life is I looked at it backwards. Instead of I am the life, I looked at the life I am. Look at me. Look at what I've done. Look at how meaningful I am. Look at how I'm able to do these things. Look at the life that I am. Look at the life that you are. And if I'm going to walk and follow the way, and if I'm going to know that he is the truth, and when he says that I am the life, then I have to allow the great I am to change who I am. I want to live with this narrative arc that my life represents his story, not my story. In Romans chapter 10, verse 13, it says that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. Everyone will be given a home. Everyone will be given life. Everyone has this understanding that life is not about here, but it's about heaven. It's about living with this kingdom purpose. It's with living with this understanding that when he says, I am the life, that I take that and I infuse that into every part of who I am. And I fail regularly. And it's the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the greatest. The key idea, if we look at that again, it's time to move from a faith that is moderately important to a life radically transformed by Jesus, a life full of meaning and purpose. You step back and the same questions applies. Regardless of where you are in your spiritual journey, the same question is how? Like how do I get to that next phase? How do I keep moving deeper and deeper into relationship with him? I love how Brad Lomanek last week, he said, go out and be a hope dealer. So often we focus on the areas that we're failing in or the areas that we're struggling in. In reality, if I'm a hope dealer, then I'm going out and I am sharing the good news consistently of what God is doing in my life. And how Jeff shared earlier, he said, trust God and do the next thing. Like, just trust God and do the next thing. You don't have to have it all planned out. You don't have to have a complete agenda, but just trust God and do the next thing. You see, we have a tendency to lean back in life and to kind of let it just come to us. Josh and the Afters have a song, And one of the lines is, I tend to think that time is going to wait for me. And guess what? It's not. In the slightest bit, it's going to tear you up. And before you know it, you've been out of high school for 29 years. And it just goes. And we wait for life to come, and we wait for life to hit us, and we wait for life to happen. But what happened if you shifted from leaning back to really leaning into life and being ready for what is coming next, and understanding that we are walking and we are pursuing where he says, I am the way, and we understand that when he says, I am the truth, it's more than just knowing about it, but it's living with it. And when he says, I am the life, it's I am going to lean completely into my life with the understanding that he can not only change my life, but everyone else's life around me. As we look at this Alpha series, if you're going to go and look at the core, basic foundations of following Jesus, the one thing that I would say is if I'm going to rip it down to its rawest form, I would say, here's what I've realized. Jesus brings me joy. He brings me hope. He brings me peace. He brings me truth. He gives me purpose. And yet we look at oftentimes, what is Jesus about? Well, I've got to do this and I got to do that and I'm failing in this area. No, he is bringing you hope. We had somebody a while ago leave the church, and they left the church because they said, you don't make me feel bad about myself every Sunday. I'm like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard. Because I hope when you leave church, you leave here fired up. You leave here ready to go. You leave here filled with joy. Because Jesus brings joy. He brings hope. He gives you purpose. He gives you hope and joy.